Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonah. I'll be your host for this Port Jackson Securities webinar today. We're joined with Rimas from A4N. And yeah, how you going, Rimas?
Yeah, well, thanks.
Yeah,
Jonah.
good. Before we start, just to inform everyone, if you want to submit questions through, feel free. There should be a question box there. So just submit them and I'll do questions at the end. Yep.
Excellent. Thanks, Jonah. Thanks for the opportunity to present Alpha HPA. I guess probably start by sort of assuming that the business may be new to the audience, so I'll keep the presentation quite high level. But you know, in summary, we have the core of the business is a new technology for purification of aluminium, and what that core technology is allowing us as a business to do is to produce a range of ultra high purity materials, which are sort of specialist chemicals for applications, particularly in lithium-ion batteries, LED lighting, and the semiconductor sector. We're still in growth phase, but we are in production of our first stage, which is, hopefully you can see the screen now. This is stage one of two-stage project that we're building in Gladstone. And the company is really nicely positioned in terms of exposure to rapidly growing supply chains, with some really favourable tailwinds around government support for what we're doing for decarbonisation more broadly, and the sort of changing around of supply chains, which is happening pretty rapidly at the moment. So I guess I've covered hopefully the intro with those opening comments. But just a reminder, the project that we're rolling out is two stages. Stage one is now in production. It's just under $40 million investment by the business up in Gladstone. And we're in the process of rapidly expanding stage one with the monies from an Australian government grant, $15 million government grant. And we're finalising funding for stage two, which is a much larger project on the same site, scale up of about 10 times. And we also been really fortunate to attract an additional $45 million of government grant monies for that second stage. We released the DFS definitive feasibility study, back in March 20, which we're now updating for stage two, which showed the project generating somewhere between $130 and $280 million free cash flow per annum. So it's an extremely robust project, driven very much by really low OPEX costs, which are a function of our technology, and also very favourable pricing in this sort of very high purity specialist chemical kind of sector that we operate in. I won't go through our flow sheet in detail, given it's just an introduction, but I want to introduce at the front end some of our key partners. Orica, an Australian ASX 100 company who are now a shareholder. We've been working with Orica for over 4 years now on using their process reagents in Gladstone to drive our purification process, and as a function of the process, we sell Orica back a byproduct. So we have a very kind of synergistic relationship with Orica in Gladstone, and we pull our feedstock, which is a raw material that we get from Rio Tinto, also in Gladstone. And essentially, the raw material and the chemicals come into our process. We purify to a really high degree, aluminium, and then we produce a range of aluminium products. As I said, I won't go through them in full detail given the time constraints, but hopefully if we've got some questions at the end, I can sort of step through some of those products and the applications that they run in. But at a really high level, we produce high purity aluminium salts, and we produce high purity aluminas. The salts are aluminium sulfates and aluminium nitrates, and I mean, for people who look closely at, for example, the battery sector, would understand that nickel and cobalt and manganese sulfates are produced directly for cathodes for lithium-ion batteries. Aluminium sulfates is the other key component of cathodes, where aluminium is in the cathode chemistry. So Alpha is now up and producing nitrates, which is another aluminium salt, and we believe just Alpha and BHP are the only two companies directly producing cathode precursors in Australia at the moment, and we're going to rapidly expand that sulfate production next year. Aluminas, we produce aluminium oxide, aluminium hydroxide in various forms. And without me getting too granular on each product and application, what I've put in the bottom here is to show which sectors, which products apply to which sectors. So all of these products that we make have function across lithium-ion batteries, and most of them LED lighting, and the three in the middle have direct applications to the semiconductor sector. So we have really nice exposure to, rapidly, expanding high-tech industries. These are kind of just some positioning slides for people, in particular LED lighting, which is not well known really in the generalist sector, but it's probably the most powerful decarbonising technology that's been applied to date across the sector. It's already saved approximately 1.4 billion tonnes of CO2, and it can save another 1.4 with the continuing rollout of higher efficiency lighting. In the bottom, we show what are the products that Alpha makes that feeds the LED lights. We make high purity alumina, which makes LED phosphors, and we make high purity alumina for LED for sapphire glass, which is the substrate on which LEDs are built. And as the uptake of micro LEDs comes online, we'll be increasingly up, including our aluminium precursors for LED phosphors as well. This really goes down into a deeper level. So I think, in interest of time, I'll breeze through this slide, but we actually, importantly, I'll point out, we are qualified with a range of product producers already, with LED phosphor makers, with sapphire glass makers, and we're already making small scale sales into this sector, principally for our LED phosphors. What's happening in the LED market more broadly is really exciting at the moment, and it's essentially driven by what was already a strong market is now being accelerated through the adoption of mini and micro LEDs, which are the sort of have been considered for quite a few years now as the next generation of displays for consumer electronics. And then in January there was the news that the first consumer electronics maker, Apple, has made the switch, or will be making the switch, to micro LED displays for the Apple Watch. Other makers are expected to follow, and this group, MarketWatch, forecasts that will double the LED market globally in 5 years, actually less than 5 years, which is a dramatic expansion, and therefore all the raw materials that feed that market, including, we'd like to think, Alpha, really nicely positioned to feed that growth. Electrification, e-mobility is another key sort of theme that Alpha's nicely exposed to, and I think the growth in the in the EV sectors quite well known now and quite well understood, and Alpha's products play key roles in particularly high nickel cathode chemistries for the cathode, and we also supply materials for separators and anode production. Once again, I won't go through the sort of real breakdown into the real detail here, but one of probably our primary focus is the cathode and anode. Supplying aluminium sulfates for anode materials, for our cathode materials, and aluminium-based coatings for anode materials is where we're really focused on. Probably engage with it, I would say, at least 12 OEMs at various stages of qualification for each of these products. This is really an example. This is aluminium sulfate, one of our key materials, and just shows you how rapidly demand for aluminium sulfate is going, really as an example that can be applied across the rest of the product range. But sulfate demand for NCA chemistries, which is the Tesla chemistry, and NMCA chemistry, which is the General Motors. Cathode chemistries, roughly from 87 to 500, so over 5 times expansion over the next 8 years. So it's Alpha's entrance into the market is, we feel, really nicely timed here. This goes into some more detail about whose chemistry is applicable to ours. Again, interest of time, I'll come back if there's questions on it, but I'll keep moving. And I do want to talk a little bit about the semiconductor sector because it's highly disrupted at the moment. Some of the really key themes running through the semiconductor sector are reshoring of supply chains, friendshoring of supply chains, which has opened up for Alpha some amazing opportunity. And we're working with some really key and high profile end users in the semiconductor sector, getting our material qualified for principally slurries, polishing slurries, which is it's kind of a boring step, but a critical step in the production of semiconductors, essentially polishing the substrates. It's about 7, increasing to 10% of the market. So it's dramatically large market, and Alpha's really nicely exposed to that as supply chains move to safer ground. Critically in our product offering, Alpha not just makes sort of ultra high purity products, but it does it at a 70% lower CO2 profile than competing manufacturers. This is important for us as a business, but it's also really important for a range of our end users. Not all, but nearly all are really quite focused on decarbonising their supply chain. So this is a really important selling point for us. So some photos to give you a sense of the sort of business in physical form. Here's our stage 1 facility up in Gladstone. So we completed this in November, a 12-month build. It's now up and operating, very successful commissioning, producing around a tonne a day at the moment of aluminium precursors mainly for anode materials. And it's going through a rapid expansion at the moment, which is rolling out the high purity alumina production inside that facility. Here's some additional photos to show the facility in full swing. We employ about 40 boys and girls into this site. And if you break that site open, everything that's in grey is built and operating, and what's in pink is being installed at the moment, which will give us capacity across all of our product range at high production rates, critical for a number of our really key end users and suppliers to be able to do that ahead of stage 2. And stage 2 is the very large expansion, as I said, roughly a 10x in scale, on the same site which we own, strategically located immediately opposite Orica, our chemical partners at Gladstone. So hopefully this gives you a sense of the scale. We've already secured a government grant for that. We're expecting more, and we've also got $100 million of support from the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility and another government agency of similar quantum. We can't quite name yet, but we're really quite close to aggregating the final project finance for stage 2 rollout and expecting FID on that this half. A little bit around what we do globally. We have marketing agents globally. We sell into North America, US, Germany, and Japan, China. Our sales are currently quite small, but we're in qualification with over 40 different end users. So in the qualification process across those key sectors that I spoke about earlier. And in some cases, we've been through in qualification for over 2 years. So it's an extremely demanding, high quality repeatability process to get into these supply chains. And once in, though, it's an incredible barrier to entry for potential competitors. Of the customers and partners we've been able to name, having either made sales or being qualified, here's a group of names we sell already to groups like Lumileds, Merck, Litech, We're in the sort of LED phosphor and chemical space. We're working closely with sort of materials giants like Saint-Gobain, distributors, global distributors like Brenntag, to distribute our product, particularly in Europe and the US. So just a little bit on corporately how the business kind of sits. We're currently sort of market cap a little bit over $500 million. We're no debt in the business. Well, strong balance sheet with over $25 million in cash, and a really nice sort of debt-free runway through to FID. Very well supported by founders, shareholders, sort of high net worth shareholders, institutional funds, and increasingly ESG support from the business, which is extremely helpful. And more recently, we just have a slide here on Orica, because as I said, we've been working with them for a long time. They know our business better than any other business, and in November last year they took an investment, 5% holding in the business, and paired with that shareholding was an agreement to work with them on a new project site in Alberta, next to one of their facilities in Alberta, and that will enable us to supply the rapidly expanding battery sector in North America, and that's what this slide's trying to highlight, both particularly in Quebec, Ontario, and the US, the sort of capital rollout of the manufacturing sector to supply lithium-ion batteries or assemble lithium-ion batteries is pretty dramatic, and with sort of regulatory support around things like the Inflation Reduction Act actively facilitating domestic or North American supply to some of those markets. A replication of our site in North America is well placed to supply this sector. We're only at concept stage now, but we do expect to move it quickly from here. So again, this may be quite useful for people looking at the business for the first time, to sort of get a sense of how far and relatively quickly the business has developed since feasibility study in March 20. We've had the project fully approved. We've issued a range of MOUs with key customers, including Brenntag and Saint-Gobain. We now supply our material, our projects, through 100% renewable energy, thanks to an agreement with CleanCo Queensland. As I mentioned before, we're approved through the first stage of approvals with the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility for a $100 million loan, and then we've had successfully applied for 2 really significant federal government grants to support the business. More recently, I mentioned the Orica investment in November last year, and ahead of the business, some really key sort of catalyst-rich little period for us. We've entered production successfully into stage 1, really validating the technology and the process, I think, and ahead of us is sort of finalisation of these key customer contracts, issuing of final FID, DFS and final FID all this half. So an incredibly busy and, as I mentioned, would like to think sort of catalyst-rich little period ahead of Alpha. So that is the sort of 20-minute intro into the business. So yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to present Alpha to this group. And I guess I'll pause there, Jonah, and take any questions.
Yeah, great. No, that's great. Definitely a lot of applications there. I've actually got a question personally. What project personally for yourself takes your interest, and what are you most excited about for the next 10 years?
Within our portfolio, Jonah?
Yep.
Yeah, I think, look, the opportunity in all those sectors is pretty exciting, but probably 2, if I could nominate 2 rather than 1. The LED sector and what's happening in the particularly sapphire glass, yeah. and the sort of adoption of micro LEDs should expand the LED sector and the supply chain by 2, very rapidly, and that's really exciting. And what's happening in the semiconductors is there's sort of so much sort of government support for reshoring of supply chains in the semiconductor sector. And I say that because Alpha is a relatively, I would say 12 months ago, we're a relatively unknown business globally. And then in the last 6 months, the amount of inbound inquiry we've received from particularly the semiconductor sector has been pretty exciting. And we think really a really strong leading indicator as to, the kind of sales that we can complete into that sector.
Yep. Yeah, good. There's another one here as well. What was your biggest takeaway as MD during the pandemic, and has that changed any business processes?
Well, I think, yeah, what businesses saw globally that certainly applies to us is that everybody got a supply shock, right? And everybody started looking at how exposed and how undiversified their supply chains are. And so in many cases, in all the sectors we're working on, a kind of over-reliance on China, certainly. And as businesses adopt or adapt to that and look to diversify their supply chains, we see that as a massive positive for Alpha.
Yep.
And then layered on top of that, it's that change is effectively being what was originally kind of government carrots to do that is now government sticks as well. Particularly in the US where there's kind of carrot and stick kind of incentives to move supply chains quickly to friendly countries. So all of that has kind of flowed from COVID, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's all the questions we received. Hopefully none went unanswered there. Any words you want to end on, Rimas? So maybe from the other member in the call?
No, sorry. Let me introduce Rob, who has just joined the business quite recently on IR. So I'll let Rob make any comments. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for noticing me. No, I jumped on the call just a fraction late, and I've caught most of it. But yeah, I will be the new IR person for Alpha, and yeah, if you have any follow-up questions or anything that you want to ask about Alpha, please reach out to me, and obviously I'll come back to you, with whatever you need. And I'm here to make life easier for people such as yourself to get information about the company.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, thanks for joining us today, Rimas, and everyone in attendance. This has been another webinar from Port Jackson Securities. Take care.
Thanks all. Great then.
See ya.